In terms of trying to overcome some of this, like, what do you think can be done to improve the situation for journalists?
I think some people talk conventionally about how to improve the condition of journalists. They talk about pay, they talk about better conditions of work. I don't see it that way. I mean, American journalists are well paid, and some of their reports are garbage. Some of the guys in the mainstream media in the U.S. get paid $5 million every year. They get paid all kinds of emoluments and packs, and they say don't provide any report. They just embellish stories and move away from telling the story as opposed to telling about themselves. So it's about image of the newscaster or the reporter, or and so you have a contradiction between style and facts. So, and the best writer in the U.S., for example, in the mainstream media, just journalist stylist, as I call them. It's just like a hairstylist. So it's the style that matters to the reader, as opposed to the facts and the interests of the society. So the problems again have to do with people coming back to looking at journalism as a tool for helping society, as opposed to a tool to ingratiating society to yourself.
So you're as far as you think this is a problem in Nigeria with journalists, is that
Well,
they're ingratiating themselves more than.
yes, I think that there's a lot of Western influence. Instead of, the journalists are becoming, they want to try and become the story, as opposed to telling the story, or making the facts available to the public. And this is also because this is where the problem of remuneration comes in. Like, when you pursue just too much of, I want to get better pay, you find a situation where each time you get more pay, instead of doing your work, you begin to think about how you can be paid attention to by other sections of the media, especially the tabloid section. So if you got paid $1 million before and you got 2 million, instead of becoming a better journalist, you went to get a plastic surgery done. And those are the kind of distractions that comes with better pay in some regard. I'm not saying that journalists should die poor, but I'm also saying that journalists should be very careful not to allow the desire to become rich stand in the way of good stories.
So what do you think would be the best methods to kind of change this culture within journalism that you
I
see?
just said it. It's for people. It's for journalists to return back to the part of public service, especially in third world countries. Journalism should be used as a part to getting society, make society a better place to live. That's where we need. That's where we are, and that's what we need to do, because our problems are legendary. Plenty. So journalism has to serve a purpose of improving society. If it doesn't serve that purpose, then everybody's going to go down, including the journalists themselves. Yeah, and so we have to lift people out of poverty. We have to improve healthcare. We have to improve education. That is where journalism really comes in, because it keeps an eye on the various institutions in society that are responsible for making this improvement. And in third world countries in particular, they don't want to do anything. They just see the state as a way to enrich themselves. I'm talking about the ruling elites now. So it's the duty of journalists in those societies to shine the light on those dark corners.
So focusing on journalists and citizen journalists versus traditional journalists, there's a lot of work being done in places like West Africa. There are organizations within the countries that are local organizations such as NGOs, and then there are international organizations.
Yes.
That are, and a lot of the focus has been on training journalists. Do you think this is an effective method for addressing some of these issues?
If you look at the journalism training process in West Africa or in Africa as a whole, the rest of the world, every day somewhere somebody is training a journalist. And you begin to imagine how come there's this much training and there's not any improvement in reporting, you know, because training themselves can't make the difference. You know, it is the mind of the person who's been trained, and like I keep saying, the gods that matters in places like West Africa, in places like Africa, because if you're a journalist in Africa, you have to breach barriers, you have to break, ceilings, you have to break all kinds of things, you have to walk in a line of fire to be able to report what is accurate, honest, and of benefit to society. And I come from that angle of, that journalism must have benefit society. It cannot continue to be a fraternity, of guys who graduated from Ivy League schools. No, it has to have benefit society. So if you're in those areas, you can have all the training in the world. If the trainings don't address the key issues about the tools that are needed, to get people to get information across to people, then you're not training anybody. And why I'm saying that is that if you train anybody to write like New York Times in Nigeria, because you come from journalism school, DJ school at Columbia, do they have a New York Times environment in Ghana? No. Do they have a New York Times environment in Nigeria? No. So if you spend a month training somebody to write like a New York Times reporter, you have just wasted almost your training time. Because you are not dealing with the fact that, if a New York Times reporter writes a good story and it contains all the facts, it's a powerful investigative story, he gets a Pulitzer Prize. If you write a good story in Nigeria, you get shot. So those are two different environments to work in. And then the other thing is that a lot is forgotten about the framework for the trained minds to work. I want to see people first and foremost enforcing Africa-wide the institution of FOI laws, freedom of information, so that journalists can even have access to information legally. I want to see the reform of the libel laws, such that if you claim that I libeled you, I don't go to jail because you are the governor of the state. You have to prove that I also didn't libel you. It's not that the moment you take me to court, the onus is on me, the writer, to prove that I didn't libel you, even though my facts are straightforward and correct, because you have control over the lawyers and judges. So they need to reform libel laws in such a way that a lot of what is libelous today can fall conveniently under freedom of speech. That if you're in public office, you just can't lay claim or stake claim to the same privacy that individuals have. Like on our website, recently we saw one of the pictures of the son of the president, kind of gone, toying around with national currency, about 5 major pictures. We published it on our website without any inhibition, and they have fired over 40 Secret Service agents attached to the president because of the pictures. And I'm sure that if they can fire 50 or 40 of their people, they probably would have firebombed our office if we're based in Nigeria, or kill everybody who worked worked with our reporters. What I'm saying is that if the pictures are not photoshopped, which they admitted that they are not, it should fall within the purview of freedom of speech for people like me to be able to publish them without being killed, or without going to jail, or without getting dragged to some legal process that will just waste my time. So that reform needs to. So there has to be legal reforms, and most importantly, there has to be dedication to protection of journalists. And I'm not, when I say protection of journalists, I'm not talking about just CPJ spinning out press releases about, oh, this person just got killed. There must be a long-time process, legal again, international, or maybe we approach the International Criminal Court, that the death of a journalist should not end with the issue of a press release by the CPJ. We must be able to pursue the logical conclusion the same way you pursue a leader for genocide, anybody who kills a journalist. So he doesn't think that the statute of limitation is over. The moment he leaves power, he can go on asylum and he can stay somewhere, and as long as he didn't commit the bigger crime of genocide, he can kill a journalist and walk away. You should be able to be answerable 20 years, 40 years, until you die. You must be able to be answerable to the death of a journalist if you are linked, if you're head of state or the son of a head of state or someone acting on behalf of the head of state. There has to be a very clear-cut process of prosecution internationally for people who kill journalists or who kill people who express their freedom of express. I mean, who express themselves freely.
So, in terms of legal reform, do you see a role for certainly local organizations, but international organizations as well, like NGOs and things like that? Do you think there's a need for them to put pressure on the government and to work maybe in advocacy campaigns and things like
Absolutely.
that? Like
that's the thing. I mean, when it comes to legal reform, for example, a whole lot of journalists are fighting for FOI laws in Nigeria. It's been on, and the parliament. It's almost 8 years old. They will refuse to do anything about it. When it gets there, it gets thrown out. There must be a way that international media, the international NGOs are able to say, look, enough of this. We make this an issue that in the entire Africa, until a country performs, allows FOI laws to be instituted, we are not going to deal with those countries, and we make sure that our congressmen are, drawn into it. We don't send international aid to those countries that do not have a way of explaining how they spend the aid, because that is where it comes from, is that all these secretive laws and classified materials in Africa are so much that it's just so easy for an African leader to just, disappear the entire aid for their country for the year, and nobody can ask because they are beyond the limit of questioning from the point of view of journalists who want to write about it. I want to be able to say, look, if the UNDP spent $20 million in Nigeria fighting polio, I must be able to have access to every receipt that's used, every vehicle that's been bought, and then it is when you have information about those things that you can then go and look for those things physically. So it's not just NGOs, international multilateral organizations must be forced to sign on those reforms, like the World Bank and the IMF, who actually are the ones who act as between these countries or leaders and the lenders.
So, to go into one kind of particular area, the topic of oil.
Yes.
Nigeria is a major oil producer. It's central to its economy. And there are a lot of indications that the media of Nigeria really aren't able to do an adequate job of covering the oil, following the money, and really tracking from the oil companies through the government budgets and things like that. The media need more to be able to properly cover this. I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of how to encourage that to happen.
Well, first and foremost is making sure that some of the advocacy that are going on internationally now become codified. And one of it is that it's not just enough to say that, pay as you earn or pay as you lift or whatever, And some of them are even wrongly coined. I think I've heard people saying, well, pay as you earn. Or you publish what you pay, kind of. No. I think they should let us do the mathematics. It should be publish what you extract. If you say to Shell, public what you pay, and officially Shell is publishing just what they pay, conventional to the Nigerian government, they are not bound to publish what goes on under the ground in terms of bribery and kickbacks. Nobody can ever find those as long as those countries have ways of legally covering up how to extract information from them, lack of FOI laws. But if you say to Shell, public what you take out of Nigeria, I can do the calculation, I'll do the maths, and then, we can then say, well, this is what you took, how much did you pay? And whenever they declare what they pay, which can be tracked internationally, we can immediately find out the difference and find out the trough or the black hole into which a lot of the money has been falling into. So we should be careful, the international NGO now should be careful not to actually advocate on behalf of lingos that they themselves have no idea how they came about, and they must carefully understand that, the extractive industry is, a criminal industry. Apart from oil, gold, silver, copper, the history of all these resources has something about criminality. So there's nobody who works in those industries who actually wants openness. And to pry open the extractive industry, you have to just go beyond, just mere advocacy. You have to step up and stamp your feet to the ground and say, look, this is what we're going for, and this is how we're going to go about it. We won't accept anything less. But most importantly, I think, for example, in Nigeria, it is top secret what Nigeria exports. It's just a matter of conjecture when they say, well, we think we're exporting 2.5 million barrels a day, because that's what they report to OPEC. That's not exactly what is reported. Where we can find out those things is the records of export on a daily basis from the export terminals. So, but if you go to the Nigerian Petroleum Corporation today, they have a website. They don't have any records about how many barrels of crude oil they export on a daily basis, or how much they sell them for, how much goes to their partners, how much goes to the transportation hub that takes the crude to the refineries. So except we find those things, except we force the government to reform the legal process in such a way that anybody I say, can access those kind of information, then we're in trouble. If you go to the U.S. website on energy, they'll tell you how many percentage of energy in this country comes from coal, comes from biodiesels, it comes from hydroelectricity, it comes from the nuclear plants. You don't have those information in Nigeria. You don't have it in a lot of African countries. So I think we have to really, really start from there, actually. And if it's becoming expensive to do so through mainstream media, I have said that everybody should become a reporter. And that's why the concept of citizen journalism is very, very appealing to me, because it's citizens that are actually at the point of breaking news. And I cannot be wrong, because it has become an integral part of even the mainstream media. There's no way you go to CNN, their front page has reports, and these are reports coming from all over the world, where their own reporters cannot even get to, even if they use a private jet, if each of them had a private jet. I always refer to New York Times. New York Times has a representative in the whole of West Africa. Maybe, they have a bureau in Ivory Coast, or maybe Senegal, or now I think maybe recently Nigeria. If you're a New York Times reporter covering the entire West African region or Sub-Saharan Africa, you have to have a crystal ball to be able to report accurately what is happening in all these very interesting societies in the region, interesting countries. Not only are they interesting countries, they don't even speak the same language. In the West African region alone, you have 3 major international languages or lingua franca being spoken. No, yes, national languages being spoken: Portuguese, French, and English. And if you're a New York reporter who trained at Columbia Journalism School, and maybe you took some classes at Alliance Française somewhere in the city, so that you could make up your French a bit. There's no way you can report accurate. There's no way you can tell me that a report coming out of Senegal about an event that took place in Nigeria is accurate. That defeats the essence of journalism. So where should we go is to allow people to use all the small tools that are available technologically to report. So you have people in Nigeria who has witnessed an accident or who is seeing the police killing somebody. They have a cell phone in their pocket that has a small camera. They can take, a 10 seconds video of it and upload it to the next, when they find the next available computer, send it to me, or set up a blog on their own, which is cheap to do. So my own idea has been that to reform the traditional media, we have to take them off the high horse, by turning everybody into a reporter at this point. And then, we will have to renegotiate the terms of media practice by way of saying, look, now that we have democratized the media, if you want to work in that institution, you have to do it according to the rules of the people.
So to think of this on an international level, so you're working from here and trying to promote this. There's also the opportunity for international organizations, NGOs, to promote citizen journalism. How do you think they can do that?
Well, I think that they have to jettison this idea that every training has to be conventional, that you have to train the same guys in the newsroom. No, they must very quickly, understand that journalism has moved on. And they must lash on this new era of media, and that's the new media. Because I don't understand why international NGOs are still stuck with newspapers and television stations. I mean, newspapers in a matter of time will become museum materials. You only find them in museums. So the era we are in now, well known to everybody, is the era of new media. And citizen journalism is a very, very big component of that. There's no country in the world, even some countries that don't have newspapers or have only government newspapers, that you don't find bloggers. You don't find people who are writing, even from China. A lot of people, thousands of people are writing about China. Even if someone were to want to engage in business in China today, the first place he will go is on Google. And the first 10 or 15 materials you have on Google about any city in China is not most likely going to come from Xinhua news agency. You come from bloggers, people who are on the ground, who have experienced it. So that is new media, that's citizen journalism, that's citizen reporting. So international NGOs have a duty to just quickly say, look, especially for third world countries where access to information is a problem legally, the best way, the best inroad to train people is to say, look, I'm going to give you a flip camera. Go around, hide it as much as possible, and send me 1 or 2 minutes of video, and we upload it on Google. And it's seen by thousands of people, instanter. As opposed to, I'm going to send you a printing press, and I'm going to send you television cameras, and you have to then come back and train on how to use it, and then you have to train how to edit at those professional level. Nothing gets done that way. I mean, we just have to adapt to what has become the era of reporting. I mean, that's become a new era of reporting. That's new media. Right? I don't think people have any excuse, including international NGOs, to stick to the past when the future is here.